Hi there. It's March the 9th, and we've come in our journey through the book of Numbers to the end of chapter 11. We left yesterday the place where the people were complaining and wanting meat and food, and God said, I will give you more meat than you can possibly eat, which leads to something disastrous in a moment. But we also said that God was going to help Moses bear the weight of these people. And so he calls 70 leaders, 70 men who are set aside, set apart, and God comes in the person of the cloud, he comes in the presence of the cloud, and he takes the spirit that's on Moses and puts it on these 70 men. And as a result, these men begin to prophesy. Now, the word prophesy in Hebrew means bubble up, bubble forth. And they begin to speak out the great things of God. It's a little bit like Pentecost in one sense in Acts 2. They're all prophesying. In fact, the Spirit of God is so powerful it actually touches two men who are not there in the meeting where the Holy Spirit is falling on people. They're still in the camp, and they start prophesying. They start speaking out the amazing wonders of God. Eldad and Medad, they're called. And someone comes running in and says, "Hey, Eldad and Medad are prophesying, and they're not authorized by you, Moses." Moses says something very interesting at the end of Numbers 11. He says, "Are you worried on my account? Are you worried for my fame and glory? I wish all the Lord's people were prophets. I wish all the Lord's people could have this connection, this experience of God's power flowing through them." Tragically, this leads to the people of Israel's desires for meat, their lust for meat being fulfilled. But it says that and a whole crowd, a whole flock, so many quails are blown in on a wind from the sea. We can't imagine what that was like. But it says that even as the people were eating the meat of these quails, a plague came and many of them were wiped out because of their disobedience and because they were not prepared to trust God for their provision. Then we come to a place in chapter 12 where Moses is attacked personally, and he's attacked, sadly, by his own brother and sister. He's married an Ethiopian woman. Whether that's wise or not, we're not given to know. But this causes jealousy, or this causes a reaction in his brother and sister. And they say, why should Moses be so special? Why should he be the one who everyone follows? Aren't we important too? After all, Aaron was the one who stood with him in Pharaoh's courts. Miriam is the one who led the women on the banks of the Red Sea. They're both, they say that in our own right, we have the right to be recognized. But God is very clear, and God says to them, I speak with Moses mouth to mouth. The actual Hebrew PRP, he says, I speak to him mouth to mouth. I'm very close with him, even though it also says that Moses is the meekest man that there was. He's the humblest man. Moses does not push himself forward. Moses has not willingly taken on this role and this task. But the Spirit of God sets him apart, and actually there's a demonstration of God's power when God makes Miriam leprous, and she has a skin disease miraculously, and it's only through Moses' prayer for her that she's healed. She still has to go out with the camp for 7 days to be in quarantine, and it says the camp doesn't move until she comes back in. But she has to experience God's power through her brother to see how serious this matter is. And then lastly, as we come to chapter 13, again, this is a very sad ending to this chapter. Here the people of Israel have journeyed through, they come to the wilderness of Paran, they come to the borders of what's going to be their promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey. And Moses appoints 12 men to go in and to spy out the land, that is, to see what the land is like, to see what inhabitants it has, to see what fruit it has, to see what its harvest is like. Now God's already told them this is a land flowing with milk and honey. But when they come back from looking at the amazing things they've seen and carrying grapes on poles between them because the grape harvest is so heavy and so rich, the men still come back and say, but there are giants in the land. There are those who are bigger than we are. And And Caleb says we can go in. Caleb, one of the spies, says we can go in and we can take the land. God is with us. But the other spies, it says, bring an evil report. And they say, no, there's no way we can take the land. There's no way we can go in there, because when we went in there, we were like grasshoppers in their sight. There are so many things in these few chapters that are sobering for us as we look at this this encounter, the encounters with God, the personal enmity between Moses and his brother and sister, the people's lust, the people's desire that drives them, their selfishness that is not satisfied with God's provision, and finally the people's refusal of God's promise. This is what God has made them for. This is what God's called them to. No wonder in the New Testament that we're encouraged again and again not to be like those who in the wilderness refused God's provision, refused God's heart, refused God's goodness, and they hardened their hearts against him. Let us not harden our hearts against the living God, who wants to pour out his Spirit, who wants to make us prophetic people, who wants to make us those who experience all of the goodness of God in the land of the living. Have a good March the 9th.